Why the big 8x10 camera with the 4x5 reducing back? Have I lost my mind? Hopefully not. In this video, I'll take a closer look at the Chamonix 8x10 to 4x5 reducing back for the Chamonix Alpinus X convertible view camera, and maybe, just maybe, I'll somehow rationalize my seemingly ridiculous purchase of this back. During the production of my last video on large format lenses, I was forced to cull through my nearly forgotten 4x5 negatives that have been stashed away in boxes so that I could provide example images of various focal lengths. In my mind, I really had written off 99.99% of all those negatives, and I was zealously confident that I wasn't going to find anything that I was willing to share on social media. What I actually discovered was that some of my 4x5 images weren't as bad as I had remembered, and that I used to shoot more varied subject matter. Not just portraits and landscapes, but human-made objects too, like trucks and trains. I even experimented quite a bit with macro photography, which I personally found to be very challenging and oftentimes unpredictable. But shifting into 8x10 really changed the way that I shoot. The combination of the prohibitive cost of 8x10 film and my refined vision of printing just a select few images ridiculously huge to hang in my family's home has really narrowed the subject matter I shoot. It's limited the extent of my photographic experimentation and has ultimately reduced the number of pieces of sheet film I choose to expose. I try to make every image count towards the goal of making images that give me the wow factor every time I look at it. That's a really difficult challenge. So what does this have to do with shooting 4x5 with a reducing back on 8x10 camera? Well, for me, everything. At the time of recording this video, my film freezer is stocked with 25 sheets of Velvia 100 and a completely sealed box of Velvia 50. That's 20 sheets of saturated goodness. I want to make those discontinued 45 sheets of 4x5 film count. They are just as valuable to me as my 8x10 film, as long as I don't screw them up. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll recall that I used to shoot with Zone 6 Studios Fieldbox cameras in both the 4x5 and 8x10 sizes. But the limitations of using those cameras really became increasingly frustrating for me because these cameras were getting in the way of making images. If you'd like to learn more about the Zone 6 Studios large format cameras, I'll leave a link to my video in the description. Making my workflow easier and more efficient became blatantly apparent when I started shooting with this 8x10 Chamonix Alpinus X convertible camera. And no, Chamonix is not paying me to say raving things about their products, nor have they had any editorial input on my thoughts. I genuinely believe that this is the finest camera ever built that works exceptionally well for the way that I shoot. The camera just gets out of my way so I can focus on being creative. Do you see where I'm going with this? Why not give myself the advantage of shooting with a camera I enjoy for 4x5 as well? This should, theoretically, help me make those discontinued pieces of Velvia film be contenders for printing ridiculously huge. Have I justified purchasing an 8x10 to 4x5 reducing back over purchasing a dedicated 4x5 camera? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. I'd enjoy hearing from you. Okay, let's take a closer look at this reducing back. Chamonix provides this lightweight, soft padded case that fits nicely into the Alpinus X convertible camera's case. The construction materials used matches my camera by using a combination of teak, carbon fiber, and anodized aluminum parts painted black. It weighs 1.6 pounds, which is actually lighter than the 8x10 back at 1.9 pounds. Not a huge difference, but it is nice to know that the overall camera weight isn't changing significantly. On a related side note, there potentially could be a significant savings in overall pack weight from using 4x5 film holders compared with 8x10, depending upon the quantity packed and materials used to construct them. At these reasonable weights, here's a wild idea. Why not pack to shoot both 4x5 and 8x10? Lots of large format fun in a variety of sizes. Isn't that the spice of life? The reducing back measures 12.2 by 12.2 inches with a depth of 1.25 inches. The back attaches to the camera using the same principle as the 8x10 back. You begin with an offset of about 1/8 of an inch from the bottom to allow the back to slide into the receiving dado on the rear standard. Once the film back is seated in the dado, you'll feel the power of the magnet pulling it towards the bottom of the rear standard. This allows the 4 screws at the top and bottom of the rear standard frame to lock into the tiny slots located on the film back. This makes for an incredibly secure connection without the use of any slides or external locks. Absolutely brilliant. My only caution is that you do need to make sure that the film back seats properly into the dado, or the back could potentially fall off of the camera or allow light contamination during exposure. To disengage the lock and magnet system, you simply slide the film back in the direction of the top of the camera and then pull towards you. I recommend putting your thumb under the ground glass and up against the wooden frame to get a more secure grasp to reduce the chance of the film back slipping out of your hands. The magnets used in this back are pretty strong, and the release can catch you off guard. Keep your magnetic strips and analog watches away. Interestingly, you don't need to remove the entire reducing back to change orientation from a horizontal to vertical position. Instead, this is accomplished by sliding these locking levers upward to loosen the 4x5 frame, which sits on these 2 support brackets. It's important to note that there are no magnets holding this onto the reducing back. So once those locking levers are in the unlock position, the only thing stopping it from crashing to the ground are your hands. Other than that, this is a sufficiently secure connection. To help level the camera to your desired orientation, there are these 2 very robust bubble levels. The ground glass is quite bright, but of course that'll depend upon the maximum aperture as well. A lens with an f9 aperture is still going to be dim. There is a grid consisting of about 1 centimeter spacing with ratio markings for 6x45, 6x6, 6x9, and 6x12 roll film backs. Additionally, there are horizontal and vertical dash lines to help with framing your composition. The center of the ground glass contains a reticle precisely indicating the center of the ground glass. It is surrounded by a microprism ring that appears hazy or shimmering when the image is out of focus. As the image is brought into focus, the microprism becomes clear. This is an advanced feature that definitely can come in handy. One of my favorite features that Chamonix builds into their ground glasses are these clipped corners. This makes it really easy to stay behind the camera and see if you have any mechanical obstruction between the ground glass and your lens. You simply look through these cutouts to ensure the full, unbroken circle of the aperture is visible from each corner. This will help prevent unintended vignette owing to pushing your camera movements too far. I certainly have made that mistake on more than one occasion. As a side note, you can also check for mechanical obstruction by looking through the front of the lens. There should be a clear view of the corners of the ground glass. A nice finishing touch is the Chamonix branding. To protect the ground glass, there is a clear piece of acrylic that sits on top of the ground glass. If I'm packing both the reducing back and the 8x10 back, I'll leave the 8x10 back attached to the camera as usual, and leave the reducing back in its case with the acrylic protector facing outward. I also make sure that the reducing back is placed on the side of the camera's ground glass for maximum protection of both backs. Interestingly, there are these 4 circular attachment points that enable you to add accessories like an additional protective plate. I noticed that on Chamonix's webpage that some of their photos show a removable piece of aluminum for this purpose. My friend Jay recently purchased this same reducing back, and his came with a removable carbon fiber protector. On all of the cameras I've used in the past, the ground glass has always contributed to my love-frustration relationship with large format. If you want to hear more about that, check out my video on why I shoot large format. I'll leave a link to that video in the description. Hey Tony, what's it like to actually use this 8x10 to 4x5 reducing back? Get ready to feel the breeze. Inserting film holders into this reducing back is that easy. You just use a finger to pull back on the spring-loaded ground glass back in this recessed area and slide your 4x5 holder into place. Just be sure the film holder's lock rib falls into place by wiggling the film holder back and forth. There should only be about 1 to 2 millimeters of movement. To remove the film holder, just pull the ground glass frame towards you and remove the film holder without yanking out the dark slides, of course. Some of you may be concerned that with extreme wide-angle lenses, like the Nikon Nikkor 75mm SW lens, camera movements may be limited owing to the longer bellows having to be compressed, which subsequently results in increased stiffness. This is a legitimate critique of using a reducing back on a bigger camera. However, I can reasonably still apply front lens tilt and swing and rear tilt and swing to my images. Front rise, fall, and shift are definitely confined to a fixed position. In all fairness, my 4x5 Zone 6 Studios camera wasn't all that great too unless I used the bag bellows. Even then, movements were still limited. For the type of photography I shoot, this really isn't a big concern of mine. But if you like architectural photography, for example, then using this back might limit your ability to make adjustments to the subject to lens alignment and framing of your image. Conversely, if you like macro photography, the bellows extension is ridiculously huge. That same 75mm lens could theoretically be used at the near maximum 600mm bellows extension of the Chamonix Alpinus X convertible camera for an 8 times magnification. I think the important point to remember here is that there are always advantages and disadvantages to using our gear. It all depends on how we are planning on using it. But wait, there's still one more fantastic feature that this 8x10 to 4x5 reducing back has, the international or Graflok back. This is an option that my Zone 6 Studios 4x5 camera didn't have that forced me to make a modified back so that I can use roll film holders like my 6x7 and 6x17 backs. In order to take advantage of the international back feature, the ground glass frame has to be removed. In my experience, this can be a little tricky. I discovered that it can be marginally easier to remove the ground glass frame if it's oriented in the vertical position. But of course, this isn't always convenient if you're going for a horizontal composition and only relying on the reducing back's ground glass for focusing and composition. What I like to do is pull back on both spring lever arms at the same time towards me as I apply light pressure with my thumbs at the closed end of the ground glass frame. It's a bit awkward at first, but with a little patience and practice, it's not bad. Once the ground glass frame is out of the way, the roll film holder can be easily mounted by lining up the lock rib with the corresponding groove on the reducing back. Then the holder can be secured in place by rotating these 4 half-moon locks. Reinserting the ground glass frame couldn't be easier. You simply line up the stud screws with the recessed area at the tip of the spring lever arms and push the ground glass frame towards the pivot point of the spring lever arms until it locks back into place. While I personally don't use my roll film backs on a regular basis, it is really nice to know that I have this option available to me. On a related side note, one great mechanistic aspect of this setup is that the focusing bed doesn't limit my ability to take vertical 6x17 images. The Dado 6x17 panel back is pretty long and interferes with the focusing bed on my Zone 6 Studios 4x5 camera. The only option I have is to rotate the entire camera to a vertical orientation. That's always nerve-wracking, even with a sturdy tripod and heavy-duty head. If you'd like to learn more about the Zone 6 Studios camera and the Dado 6x17 panel back, I'll leave a link to those videos in the description. One last point of interest that I'll make is that of the standardization of my lens boards across both my 4x5 and 8x10 lenses. Since camera manufacturers tend to pick a standard lens board size, it goes without saying that in order to use lenses on a particular camera, they need to be mounted on the corresponding lens board size. Prior to this, I had 2 sets of lenses on 2 different size lens boards to accommodate the respective cameras they were being used on. I even had a few lenses that could cover 8x10 that I couldn't just quickly grab and use on my Chamonix Alpinus X convertible camera without putting some effort into swapping out the lens boards. On the contrary, I'd like to use my Nikon Nikkor 450mm M lens on 4x5 to really get some extra reach. But because that lens stays mounted on a Linhof lens board with my 8x10 Chamonix camera bag, I've only done that once. This just unnecessarily complicates my workflow. Since I'm now invested in the Chamonix camera ecosystem, I decided to take this opportunity to mount all of my 4x5 lenses onto Linhof-style lens boards. It's important to note that the Chamonix Alpinus X convertible camera natively uses CNR lens boards, but I purchased the Chamonix CNR to Linhof lens board adapter, which allows me to use all of my lenses on Linhof lens boards, except for my Nikon Nikkor 150mm SW lens, which is ridiculously huge and only fits on a CNR lens board. If you want to learn more about that lens, I'll leave a link to my video in the description. This presents a great opportunity to not only use my 8x10 lenses on 4x5 film, but to also experiment with using my 4x5 lenses with my 8x10 film. No barriers except for the size of the image circle. Maybe seeing the entire image circle will make for some interesting photos. Have you tried using lenses designed for 4x5 coverage with your 8x10 camera for creative purposes? Please share your experience with us in the comments. I'd enjoy hearing from you. In conclusion, the Chamonix 8x10 to 4x5 reducing back is an exceptionally well-made piece that perfectly complements the smoothness of using the 8x10 Chamonix Alpinus X convertible camera and all of its controls. It just gets out of my way so that I can stay focused on creating images and enjoying the scenery. Now it's just up to me to make those discontinued 45 sheets of 4x5 Velvia film count. Do you own a reducing back for your camera's ecosystem? Drop me a comment below with your thoughts. If you've enjoyed this content, I would greatly appreciate your show of support for my channel by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to my channel, and clicking on any of the Amazon links in the description to search for an item you're interested in. Any purchase, regardless of the item, contributes to a commission I receive from Amazon that costs you absolutely nothing. As always, thanks for watching.